Hello, Brant. Very nice to have you with us today. Thanks very much for being there with us. Just to say a word, so this event was also possible thanks to the help of our sponsors, Solvay Entrepreneurs, Software in Brussels, the MIC Brussels, iMinds, Group S, Better Group, and Career Delta. So thanks again to all of you.
So thanks for having me here. It's great to be in Brussels, and it's a beautiful day outside, so I feel fortunate to be here.
First of all, Eric Ries, in the foreword of your book, The Lean Entrepreneur, mentioned you as an early adopter of the lean startup theory. Could you tell us how it started and how you became struck by this lean entrepreneur theory?
So I think all entrepreneurs, all people that have worked in startups that have failed are potential early adopters of the lean startup methodology, so I count myself as one of those. But how I came about it specifically was in the mid-2000s, I was acting as a consultant, a marketing consultant, and I launched a service called Sales and Marketing R&D, or Research and Development. And the idea was, can we take some of the learning iterative processes that engineers use and apply them to the marketing and sales fields? And so we tried to do this in a number of startups, and really that failed too. And I think it was because there wasn't a mind share yet around that marketing and sales has to be learned before executed. And around this time, a little bit later, Steve Blank actually wrote his book, The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, and that was my beginning down the lean startup foray. So somebody turned me on to Steve Blank's book, and I noticed that he had really already covered all the principles that I was thinking of, and he did it in so much more depth and more eloquently than myself. So I adopted Steve Blank's phraseology around customer development. And right around this time, Eric Ries started formulating his lean startup, which was a combination of Steve Blank's customer development and agile development processes. So quickly developing products in short sprints so that you can learn from the market and not waste in the development of products that ultimately people don't want. So these combinations, it hit home with me. I had been in failed endeavors, and so I very quickly realized that this was really what the startup world was looking for, and ultimately what anybody's looking for when facing uncertainty. So when you're faced with uncertainty, you want to learn, not just execute. And so the lean startup principles, customer development, running experiments, looking at data to help inform decisions, that's how you wade the waters of uncertainty.
So thanks very much. What are the elements you think that are key to be a real lean entrepreneur?
The key elements to being a lean entrepreneur: understand your customers deeply. And this doesn't mean go and ask your customers, hey, do you like my idea? Or how much would you be willing to pay? Those are superficial questions, and really you're asking your customer to help you when supposedly the reason why you're getting into business is to help your customer. So your job at this point is to deeply understand your customers, form empathy around your customers' pains and passions. And customer development is one way of doing this. Design thinking has taught these principles as well. Other people will observe customers. Any ways that you can learn what is the day in their customer's life that can be impacted by solving these problems or passions. The second thing is running experiments. So without building your whole product, can you actually run purpose-built experiments that help you de-risk your business model, that'll teach you, are you building the right product? What features are required in the product? Can you market to these people? How should you market to these people? What messages will resonate with them? What is the selling process going to look like in order to buy, from the buyer's perspective, what they want to go through? So all of these things are testable. And the idea really is, in the lean startup, is to eliminate waste in learning these things. And so sometimes it's better to run experiments that teach you these things rather than just going out and executing them. And finally, the third important element is data. So people get scared of data, right? Everybody's talking about big data these days and business intelligence, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. What you really want to do is isolate on the type of data that allows you to make decisions based upon where your startup is or your business at that moment in time. So that could be things like your marketing funnel conversions, but it also can be things like, well, what represents an engaged customer? An engaged customer might be that uses your product in a specific ways, in a specific number of times, over a time period. So these are the types of ways that you can measure engagement, measure your customer's satisfaction with the product, And if your hypothesis is wrong at what the engagement should look like, you're able to take action on it. Maybe it's the wrong customer, maybe your product needs to be improved. So again, the data is really focusing on what will move the needle of your organization at that moment in time.
What advice would you give to young entrepreneurs that are about to start their business and develop their prototypes?
The biggest tip I can tell young entrepreneurs that want to do this is find out if your customers have the problem that you think they have. And quite possibly they don't exactly the way you think they do. And so that's the most important thing going down the path. And it's actually fairly easy to do. Who is your most ideal customer? Not everyone, right? Not anyone. But who would be the most passionate? Just your own theory. Who would be the most passionate and eager person to use your particular product? And go talk to them. Go find out if they have this pain or passion that you think they do. And again, don't talk about yourself. Talk about them. Try to learn as much about them as possible.
Okay, so what would be the pitfalls that a startup should avoid falling into?
It's interesting that if you are having a hard time raising money and you can't get a lot of media, that may be a good thing. Sometimes when you get too much attention like that, it forces you as an entrepreneur to just try to spend that money and grow as quickly as possible. And this is one of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs actually can make, is you don't really want to try to grow until you're ready. And the way I like to think about it is, you're ready when your product, by the nature of the product and that it induces passion in your customers, that your existing customers will actually put new customers into the top of your funnel without you spending a marketing dime. This is derivative of passion. This comes from passion about your product. And that's an indication that you want to grow. So it's definitely a big pitfall if you try to spend money on marketing when you really should be concentrating on whether you have the right product that's creating passion in your customers. The other thing that entrepreneurs do wrong is they build too many features. The more features you build, the more confusing it is, not only to your customers about why you even exist and what problem you're trying to solve, but it's confusing to you as an entrepreneur, because some people might like you, but you won't really know why because you have too many features to track, or people won't like you and you don't know why. So it's better to start with a small set of functionality, discover the right set of customers for that functionality, and then iterate on that process until you really start seeing this organic growth that I'm talking about. So don't go big on marketing, don't go big on features. Find that nugget, that right number of features, the right functionality that matches a very specific set of eyeballs, and that's how you find product market fit.
Now about role models. Would you recommend to entrepreneurs to have a role model? And would you think of anyone or any type of person who could be a good role model for an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I think that the best role models are actually people that you can have a real relationship with, and so these people might be called coaches or mentors. I think the problem with going for bigger role models is it's hard to figure out really what they have done to succeed rather than this mythological narrative that we create around them, right? So, Steve Jobs can be your role model, but if you believe much of the press about how Steve Jobs became successful, you would be learning the wrong things. And really what we want to do with those type of people is emulate what they did, not necessarily what they say they did or what other people say they did. So I think that if you can actually have a role model that's closer to your home, that you can actually get to know and understand what it is that makes them successful, that's better. If you can't, and you want to go to one of the big visionaries as your role model, then I would suggest that you look between the lines a little bit and try to figure out what is it that they actually did and not sort of what everybody says they did.
Would you have any, among all the examples that you've seen, would you have any examples of some team, some startup team who kind of changed the way they saw things following the lean startup methodology?
Sure. Well, like one of my favorite examples actually comes from, I think it was like 1998. So I think one of the points is with this lean startup methodology that I'd like to point out is that a lot of these things aren't really new. Successful entrepreneurs have been doing these things for ages. And what Eric Ries and Steve Blank really provided us was a lexicon that described some of this behavior. And so that's what allows us to teach it and share it, and founders to collaborate on these things and be creative and come up with new experiments. So I think that that's actually the big win, rather than, hey, this is brand new stuff and now everybody should do it because it's the hip thing to do, right? So This example in 1998, Bill Gross in Southern California had this idea that he wanted to try to sell cars online. It seems kind of crazy. This was at the beginnings, really, of the commercial internet. Why would you try to sell cars online? Well, really, it was because buying cars in America was always such an ugly process, and you haggling over prices and trying to get certain options, but those options weren't available. You might as well buy a car on the lot, and this high-pressure selling. And so what Bill wanted to do was see if anybody else had that problem, that he wasn't going to create a product based only on his own needs, but that there actually existed this market out there. And so what he did is he decided he was going to build a website, try to see if he could sell cars online. Now, that's a lot of partnerships, right? How do you go after these car dealerships? How do you build a website, pretty quickly back in these early days, and have all of the options that you can buy for a car? And it was actually a pretty complicated endeavor. But so what he decided to do is put up a very simple site, have a big old text box where people could describe all the options that they wanted. And even this site took 90 days to get up. And it was kind of funny because Bill spent this money, this time, built 90 days, get the site up, and he just wanted to get these things up. So he told his developer, just make it go live, just make it go live, even though the developer had all sorts of questions. And so it goes live, and Bill Gross calls his developer up the next day and said, so how did we do last night or yesterday? And the guy says, oh, we sold 2 cars. And Bill's like, turn it off, turn the website off, turn the website off. Because he was literally losing thousands of dollars per car sold, right? So he just wanted to test the market. He wasn't really ready for that. So the way he had to fulfill them, of course, is he had to go down to the car lot and buy the car and ship it to this customer. And that was not cost effective. He wanted to prove, though, that there was a demand, that there was a market out there other than himself. And so that's a great example of what we would call a Wizard of Oz viability test. Cost very little money, very little time, relatively little time compared to building big functional websites back in the day, and yet he proved some amount of viability for the product. So to me, that is lean startup in a nutshell.
Well, thanks a lot, Brant, for all these inspiring answers. We're really excited to have you with us today in Brussels, so thanks again for being there.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.